In the year 2007, Nokia controlled over 40% of the global mobile phone market. Their devices were not just popular, they were everywhere in cities, villages, developed countries, and emerging economies. You would find people proudly holding a Nokia phone. If you were around back then, you probably remember the Nokia 3310, famously for its durability and its addictive snake game. Or maybe the sleek Nokia communicator, which made you feel like you were carrying the future in your pocket. Nokia wasn't just a brand, it was a phenomenon. At its peak, it was worth over 300 billion, more than Apple and Samsung combined at the time. But within just 6 years, this empire crumbled. Nokia went from global leader to being sold off in desperation. The same company that once set the standards for mobile phones was reduced to a footnote. So what happened? Was it arrogance, bad leadership, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Well, today we will take a deep dive into the rise and fall of Nokia, the company that connected people but failed to connect with the future. Nokia's story starts not with phones but something far more humble, a paper mill in Finland in 1865, founded by Frederick Edison. Nokia originally had nothing to do with the technology. Over the decades, the company expanded into the rubber boots, cables, tires, and electronics. By the mid 20th century, Nokia became a diversified conglomerate, producing everything from toilet papers to televisions. But it was in the 1970s and 80s that Nokia made its first serious moves into telecommunication. In 1982, Nokia introduced the Mobile Signature, one of the world's first car phones, heavy, clunky, and expensive. It was a far cry from today's smartphones, but it was revolutionary. For its time, fast forward to the 1990s, and Nokia was perfectly positioned to ride the wave of GSM technology. In 1992, the Nokia 111 was released, the first mass-produced GSM phone. This was the real beginning of Nokia's mobile empire. Through the 90s and early 2000s, Nokia dominated with phones that were durable. They were called the indestructible, affordable, variety of price points for every market, user-friendly, simple menus, iconic ringtones and games. Phones like the Nokia 5110, the 3310 and the 6600 weren't just tools, they were cultural icons. Snake, pre-installed on millions of Nokias, became one of the most played games in history. By 2005, Nokia was the largest phone manufacturer in the world, selling 250 million devices annually. They had factories across Europe and Asia, distribution in over 130 countries, and a brand name that meant trust in emerging markets. A Nokia phone wasn't just a communication, it was a status symbol. In rural Africa and Asia, people would save months just to buy a Nokia device because they knew it would last. And its peak, Nokia was making so much money that it accounted for a quarter of Finland's entire stock market value. Nokia was everywhere. Nokia was untouchable, or so it seemed. Then in 2007, a seismic shift happened. Apple introduced the iPhone. At first, Nokia executives laughed it off. They saw the iPhone as a niche luxury product, too expensive to threaten Nokia's dominance. After all, Nokia had tens of millions of loyal customers, while Apple was just entering the market business. What Nokia failed to realize was that the iPhone wasn't just a phone, it was a platform. The App Store, introduced in 2008, transformed phones into pocket computers. Suddenly, your phone wasn't just for calls and texts, it was for music, email, games, and even business. Around the same time, Google launched Android, an open source system that phone makers like Samsung, HTC, and Motorola could use. This meant hundreds of manufacturers could compete, flooding the market with Android phones at all price ranges. Nokia, however, was stuck with Symbian. Its homegrown operating system, Symbian, had been fine for the 90s and early 2000s, but by the 2008, it felt outdated, slow, and hard to develop for. Inside Nokia, engineers begged leadership to move to a modern operating system. Some pushed for Android, Others suggested accelerating development of Migo, an experimental platform. But Nokia's management hesitated. They were afraid to abandon Symbian because it powered hundreds of millions of their phones. Switching platforms felt like jumping off a moving train. This fear of cannibalizing their own products was fatal. While Apple embraced disruption, killing off the iPod to make way for the iPhone, Nokia clung to its past. As a result, developers avoided Nokia. Why build apps for Symbian when iOS and Android were growing ecosystems? By 2010, iOS had over 250,000 apps, Android had 150,000, and Symbian lagged far behind. Nokia was falling into a classic innovator's dilemma: too successful to change and too slow to adapt. By 2010, Nokia's market share was plummeting. They needed a miracle. In 2011, Nokia's new CEO, Stephen Elop, formerly of Microsoft, made a bold move. He announced that Nokia would adopt Windows Phone as its main platform. Elop's infamous burning platform meme compared Nokia to a man standing on a burning oil rig, forced to jump into icy water. He admitted Nokia had failed to keep up and drastic action was needed. The partnership with Microsoft was supposed to be the lifeline. Instead, it became an anchor. Windows Phone was sleek and beautiful, but it had no apps. Developers weren't interested and customers weren't impressed. Sales collapsed further. By 2013, Nokia's phone division was hemorrhaging cash that Microsoft bought Nokia's mobile business for $7.2 billion. To put this into a perspective, just 5 years earlier, Nokia had been worth over $300 billion. The sale was not just a business transaction, it was a tragedy. Microsoft itself would later abandon Windows Phone entirely, writing off millions of dollars. Nokia, meanwhile, retreated back to network equipment, where it still operates today. But the Nokia that dominated the mobile world, that company was gone. So what can we learn from Nokia's fall? Success breeds complacency. Nokia believed their dominance would last forever. They underestimated Apple and Android until it was too late. Never fear disruption. Apple wasn't afraid to kill the iPod to make the iPhone. Nokia was too afraid to kill Symbian. Culture matters. Reports from insider described Nokia's leadership as divided, political, and risk-averse. In fast-moving industries, that's deadly. Timing is everything. Had Nokia adopted Android in 2008, we might be living in a world where Nokia, not Samsung, is Apple's biggest rival. The rise and fall of Nokia is a cautionary tale, not just for tech companies, but for anyone who believes success today guarantees success tomorrow. Nokia's story is one of the innovation, dominance, and downfall, but it's also a story of resilience. While their phone division collapsed, the company still exists today in the telecom network space. They are no longer the kings of consumer electronics, but they haven't disappeared. The question is, could Nokia have survived if they had embraced Android earlier? Or was their fall inevitable once Apple and Google changed the game? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your opinion and perspectives. And if you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please check out my other video on deep dive on Kodak, the company that invented digital photography but went bankrupt because they ignored it. Because in business, the past is full of lessons and the future belongs to those who listen.